I'd like now to ask the Minister to tell us a survival story, his survival story, building on what Kevin told us. And I know from my kind of work life, we can learn so much from the stories of people. Regrettably, the fatalities, they can't tell us the story. Now the Minister and subsequently other stories, we will hear the survivors. Please God, the little things that made the difference. For the rest of you, very, very important, the Minister will be the last speaker before we have a coffee break. And may I now ask the Minister to tell us his story of survival. Thank you, Minister.
Well, I suppose, first of all, I learned to swim. My dad learned me to swim when I was about, I learned actually late. I was about 17, 18 years of age. And subsequently, I've taught my three girls, Aoife, Breffney and Neve, to swim. And Aoife has done a couple of life-saving courses. And she's actually done a course with the SAS in Wales. So she's a very competent swimmer, and she's a canoeist. And she actually does cave swimming, which is an extremely dangerous sport. My partner's name is Elaine, and she's from the Isle of Sheppey. She was born in the Isle of Sheppey, and she lived in the Isle of Wight. And I've been with her about 20 years. And we regularly go to a place called Torreblanca. It's between Fuengirola and Malaga. You fly into Malaga, and we go there. And there's a friend of mine in Waterford, Dr. Bill Moore, who has an apartment there. We're really good friends, and we've been going there for 17 years to this beautiful apartment. And we'd spend a week there, or 10 days. Actually, if you can recall, Mount Etna, when it went over the top, we were stuck there for about 2 weeks. The beach is just across the road from the apartment, and we would have been swimming there for 17 years. Elaine is a trained lifeguard and is a competent high diver. She far outpaces me in swimming, powerful swimmer, and can actually dive 100 foot, bang, down into the water, and actually rescued somebody in the Isle of Wight before she came to Ireland. She was very powerful and competent swimmer. And we'd actually, John and others would know the Salines, which can be a very dangerous place in Waterford, but actually Elaine would go down with the tide, which I wouldn't do, and go in onto the beach, and the tide in the Salines is a very powerful tide. So that's how confident a swimmer she was. So both of us would go there, and actually it is interesting that when we were picked up at the airport by our friend there, Rose is her name, she told us, by the way, she said across from your apartment, a chap from England died, was drowned there yesterday. And she said it's terrible, there's no lifeguards on duty until around July. We'd always go there in June, towards the end of June. And we did experience tides and currents, but nothing too serious that you wouldn't swim through or out and into. And we'd normally swim out a bit and come back in again, and swim out and come back in again, and so on. So this particular day, it was a very warm day. We'd gone up into Fuengirola and for a stroll, and we came back down at about 4 o'clock. And I said we'd go in for a quick swim, and there's a little bit of luck attached to this, because I had said, look, there's a lovely quiet place up there on the beach. Will we go up there? And Elaine said to me, well, I'm kind of tired. Will we just go in front of the hotel? It's probably what saved us, by swimming just across from the hotel. What we did notice was, which was unusual, there was absolutely no one in the water. It's very strange. Talking about 80 degrees, very few people in the water. And obviously, we didn't know there was a red flag up, and we'd been a bit naive, I suppose, and overconfident. We actually didn't think that we were overconfident. We just went in for a swim. There was a lot of waves breaking and so on. And they'd actually placed huge, big 5-ton concrete blocks along the edge, just about 2 foot into the water, to stop the sands from being taken out by the currents. And they'd all been moved. Just shows the power of the sea. And I've been on boats where I've seen the damages. So off we went swimming, and we were swimming out, and something didn't feel right. We were unable to turn, swim back in again. And we'd done a couple of powerful swim-ins, and then we started to get caught. And what happened was, as we were swimming in, all of a sudden it was like somebody just catching you by the head and pulling you under. And this was sensational because we just couldn't understand this. How could this be? How is it we can't swim at this? But, you know, we're good swimmers, we can't swim. And this went on for about a minute, and it started to get worse. I damaged my back, I cut my back, I was slammed down. Now, we were only in water maybe about, I don't know, about 20 feet, 20, 30 feet. And at this stage, it really began to get very scary. We actually could not get in. My last words to Elaine was, Elaine, I said, swim. Use all your power, swim in, let's get in. And the two of us fired in as much as we could. Didn't matter, we were being torn in. So I kind of felt, at this stage, I knew I was in serious trouble because I was in pain with my back. I knew there was water in my lungs. I knew there was. I knew there was something not right with my lungs. The power of trying to swim and not being able to swim and being banged down, and I knew I was in serious trouble. And I was actually reaching a stage where I couldn't see Elaine. And I started to go down. And I actually did start to go down. But what happened was, I actually went down and hit one of those concrete blocks. So I was able to stand. I actually stood in about stand. And when she got in there, the current had subsided. And I looked around and Elaine wasn't with me. So I started to shout. And people had come out at that stage, the few people that were there, and there was a chap from Nigeria was there with his wife. And I went back in again to go in for Elaine, and he grabbed me. And he said, no, he said, look, he said, look, you're bleeding. He said, you're bleeding from your back and so on. So I went to go back in, and he went in. And I could see him being hit and turned over back in again, and his wife kind of dragged him with other people. So I said, this is it, Elaine is gone. And I couldn't see her, and I was shouting. And it was at that moment a young guy, I'd say he was about 16, 17 years of age, just went out. And I saw him being hit, and he was turned over a couple of times, but he kept going. I couldn't believe it, he actually kept going. Then coming from the side was a guy with one of the boards, you know, the boards you'd used. He'd found the board, and they went out. But what Elaine had done was, she turned on her back, because she knew. And she'd actually said she'd prayed to her mother. Her mother had only died a few months before that. She actually said she felt her mother's presence, but she said, I can't believe I'm going to die like this. And she was telling me that there was no energy left in her. There was nothing left in her. Just to go on your back and just head out. And funny, a couple of hours after that, a Spanish policeman said, well, he said, you know, if that ever happens again, just go out, he said, into the channels, which you don't do. You try to fight back in again. So they got her in. So, like, it was just, it's hard to kind of, you kind of hear of what's it like to be near death. For me, it was just a pain, impending doom, where you felt, I can't believe that, this is it. Do you think of your children? Do you think of your wife? Do you think of actually, you don't. You don't think of anything. I couldn't think of anything because I was in so much pain. And the fear factor that would take over doesn't allow your brain to kind of think about anything else but trying to survive. And I mean, I imagine if I hadn't have hit that rock, if I'd have been another maybe 10 or 15 yards out, there was no more power in me, there was nothing left. I would definitely have drowned. So we got Elaine in and so on. Elaine was fine because she'd got on her back, but she had taken in water. So we were really lucky in the sense that we took the sea for granted. And as I say, I sail a lot, and I've swam in the North Sea actually off the Christian Raddock, which is a mad thing to do. And I do kind of, you know, a bit of an adrenaline junkie when it comes to water. And I always actually said that you know, water is beautiful, it's powerful, it's enriching, and you know, water. Like if you're good with water, and you know, if you treat water properly, it won't do any harm to you. And I always did. I always respected water. I hated to see rubbish being in water, but I didn't treat it with respect. That day there was a red flag up. There was no one on the beach. The Spanish themselves were not swimming, and here the Irishman goes in to swim. You know, kind of, I can swim. So that's how close it was. It's hard to kind of imagine. Afterwards, there's all sorts of feelings, like Elaine could have died. I couldn't get back out again. I tried to get back out, but sure, I wouldn't have been able to go from here to there because, as it transpired, there was water in my lungs, and that can be a danger as well. We got that out and so on. So that's my experience. I just took the sea for granted. I took that lovely little patch of water that we loved and we'd swam in for 17 years for granted, and at a terrible cost. And actually could have been a terrible cost to the 2 kids that rescued Elaine. And the terrible, sad thing for me is we were a bit sick and a bit ill. We never saw that chap again. And we tried to contact him. There was a Spanish magazine that's out on the Costa del Sol. We put an ad in it for the chap that was here. We couldn't contact him. We got onto the police. A policeman had come along there. Actually, that chap had tried to win as well, and he was feeling it, his boots on him and so on. So, like, we never saw, like, the complications and the effects that it could have had on people that had not even met one another, that didn't know one another, because we didn't treat the sea with respect. So that's my story. I still swim, and both of us swim, and we love it, we enjoy it, but we don't go out when there's a red flag up. And we always make sure that if they're swimming, there's somebody in the water with us. So there you are. If there's anything you'd like to ask.
Yeah. May I say, first of all, thank you very much to the Minister for addressing us today, for a couple of reasons. It's very difficult to tell a story like that because, and please don't take this the wrong way, there is a kind of a need to implicitly agree that you have done something not quite as you should have done it.
Absolutely.
The second thing is, as I said, as a project organiser, the amount we can learn from your experiences, because, as I say, it takes a great leap of faith for somebody like you to tell your story so that we can benefit from it. And a bit like what Kevin was saying, we need research, and your stories form part of that research. As chairman of the foundation, I want to thank you very much, because you also launched our Float.
That's right.
Our Float First, Swim Later poster, and thank you very much. And finally, I want to present you with a small memento, and it is a very small memento for giving of your time, giving of your story, and helping us to understand a little bit more about, and hopefully we will be able to, from your experiences, provide a better and more knowledged understanding of why people drown, and hopefully we'll be able to reduce the burden.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.